Hi everyone, thank you for joining us online today for this talk and welcome. For those of you that aren't familiar with this format, Friday Focus is an online talk series hosted by the Hunterian, and we are the museum and art gallery at the University of Glasgow. In each edition of these talks, we'll hear from a different speaker covering a different topic of interest. We tend to look at our exhibitions and displays across our venues, as well as research that goes on here at the Hunterian and across the University of Glasgow. And we also take a deeper look into all the work that goes on behind the scenes with our collections. So in today's talk, I'm really pleased to be joined by Cameron McLean, who is a numismatist and a PhD student at the University of Glasgow. And since 2019, Cameron has been volunteering his time with the Hunterian, cataloguing the Lord Stewartby Collection of Scottish coins, which is the topic of today's talk. The Lord Stewartby Collection consists of over 6,000 coins, and it was formed over 7 decades by Baron Stewartby and was entrusted to the Hunterian in 2017. In just a moment, Cameron is going to deliver a bit of a presentation for us, and then there'll be time at the end for any questions that you might have. You can pop your questions in the chat by clicking on the little speech bubble at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end, or you are very welcome to take yourselves off mute at the end of the presentation and ask your questions directly. But please do keep yourself muted for the duration of Cameron's presentation. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and I will hand over to Cameron now to deliver today's talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Cameron McLean and I'm a PhD student at the University of Glasgow, and today I'm going to be showing you some of the highlights from the Lord Stewartby Collection of Scottish coins held at the Hunterian Museum. So Ian Stewart, the man that built the collection, was born in 1935 and he initially pursued a career in banking, but he later entered politics, serving as an MP from 1974 to 1992. And he held various posts in the Thatcher cabinet in the 1980s, including as a Minister of State for the Armed Forces and for Northern Ireland. He was knighted in 1991 and was elevated to the House of Lords in 1992, taking the title of Baron Stewartby, hence the Lord Stewartby Collection of Scottish coins. He retired from the Lords in 2015 and died in 2018. Now, while he had a distinguished life in politics, today we're going to be focusing on his unmatched contribution to Scottish numismatics and the collection of Scottish coins that he formed over the course of his lifetime. Now, I just first want to explain numismatics, which is the study of coins, tokens, medals, and other related objects. We'll be focusing on coins today. Coins are just objects that are used as money and conform to a standard in value set by a ruling authority. Up on the slide is a gold ducat of King James V, the father of Mary, Queen of Scots. It was worth £2 Scots and bears the date 1540, but it was actually minted up until the king's death in 1542. Now, the two sides of a coin are called the obverse and the reverse. On the left is the obverse. This is the side that contains the monarch's name and titles. So as you can see, James V is depicted on the obverse of this coin, and he's surrounded by his name and titles in Latin, which translate to James V by the grace of God, King of Scots. The inscription on coins is called the legend, and all of the coins we'll be looking at today have legends in Latin. So what I've done throughout this presentation is I've transcribed each of the coin's legends, and I've also provided an English translation for each of them. The reverse, which is the other side of the coin, is photographed here on the right, and it depicts the Scottish Royal Coat of Arms and a legend that translates to the King's power loveth judgment. Now, reverse legends on coins can differ quite wildly. It might just continue the monarch's title. It may name the place where the coin was made, or it could contain another message. The Kingdom of Scotland had its own distinct currency, the pound Scots, as opposed to the pound sterling that was used in England and later in Great Britain. Now, the pound sterling and the pound Scots were pre-decimal currency systems. So the pound was divided into two subunits, being the shilling and the penny. There were 20 shillings in the pound and 12 pence in a shilling for a total of 240 pence in a pound. And this system was in use in Britain until 1971, when it was replaced with the decimal currency that we use today. Now, Stewartby began collecting coins in 1941 when he was 6 years old, after he found a Scottish bobby of William and Mary in a jar on a shopkeeper's counter. The Second World War was ongoing, so the coin was actually amongst scrap metal that was being collected to be melted down for the war effort. So Stewartby had to exchange this coin for another piece of metal. Stewartby's first coin actually remains in the collection to this day. Here it is up on the slide, and you can see why it would have caught his attention. So it dates to the joint reign of William and Mary. So both monarchs are depicted on the coin, and this is one of the very few times in British history that this was done. And the reverse depicts a large crowned thistle. Over the ensuing 7 decades, Stewartby built the largest collection of Scottish coins ever assembled by a single individual. It includes over 6,000 coins. That's about a quarter of all the Scottish coins remaining in existence. Only the collection held by the National Museum of Scotland is larger, yet that collection is the result of 3 centuries worth of donations and acquisitions, whereas Stewartby's collection is the result of the lifetime's dedication of one man. Stewartby generously gifted his collection to the Hunterian in 2017, where it is used as a study and teaching resource. His interest took off after that chance encounter with the coin in the shop in 1941. He joined the British Numismatic Society and gave his first lecture to it in September of 1952, and this was later published in volume 27 of the British Numismatic Journal. From the early 1950s until 2015, Stewartby wrote almost 200 numismatic publications, both as a sole author and in cooperation with others. While still at school, he wrote a book on the Scottish coinage, and he actually made the final revisions to it while he was undertaking his national service with the Royal Navy at the age of 19. And he was so young at the time that he couldn't legally sign the publication contract, so his father had to do it on his behalf. The resulting book, which is titled The Scottish Coinage, was published in 1955 and received a revised edition in 1967. And even half a century later, it remains essential reading on the subject. So Scotland's very first coins were born out of a succession crisis in England. In 1135, King Henry I of England died without a male heir. His preferred successor was his daughter, the Empress Matilda, but upon Henry's death, his nephew took the throne and ruled as King Stephen. In 1136, King David I of Scotland, who was Empress Matilda's uncle, invaded the north of England in support of her claim to the throne. He captured Carlisle, which had an English mint, and from there David produced Scotland's first coins. He later established mints in Scotland itself, including at Edinburgh. Here's one of David's silver pennies up on the slide. This one was minted in Roxburgh. It's quite crude, but you can make out a crown portrait of David on the obverse. He's depicted in profile like on our modern coins, facing to the right. Now, most of the legend is worn away on this example, but you can just make out the A in David's name. If the entire legend was intact, it would have read David Rex, which is Latin for King David, and a cross and pellet design appears on the other side. Now, this isn't one of Lord Stewartby's coins. It comes from the collection of W.J. Cuthbert. Cuthbert was a Scottish solicitor whose coin collection was donated to the Hunterian in 1999. And the reason that I'm showing you one of Cuthbert's coins is because in 2007, thieves broke into the Stewartby's home and stole the early portion of his collection. And this included Scotland's first coins produced by David I, like the one we've just looked at, up to those minted by Alexander III in the 13th century. Now, in November of last year, a renewed appeal to recover the stolen coins was launched by Crimestoppers, and they are currently offering a £50,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of those responsible for the theft. This reward will remain in place until the 27th of this month. If you know anything, Crimestoppers can be contacted by phone or through their website, and I've stuck their contact details up on the slide. This theft was an immense loss, not just to Scottish numismatics, but also to our understanding of Scotland during this period. And this is particularly true of the coins of David I, as his reign was a watershed moment in Scottish history, and we have no other primary sources relating to his coinage, so we're entirely reliant upon the coins themselves. And if the stolen coins are recovered, they can then be returned to be with the rest of Stewartby's collection at the Hunterian. Before gifting his collection in 2017, Stewartby played an instrumental role in the Hunterian's acquisition of coins of the Glasgow Mint. In the 1980s, he acted as the museum's agent, acquiring several coins of the Glasgow Mint at auction on the museum's behalf. Now, the Glasgow Mint was only active for a very brief period of time during the reign of Alexander III, who ruled from 1249 to 1286. The coins acquired by Stewartby included this penny of Alexander III's earliest coinage, minted from about 1249 to 1250. The obverse depicts Alexander III himself, again in profile, like on the coin of David I, and the reverse legend reads Robert on Gla, meaning Robert of Glasgow, the man that oversaw the Glasgow Mint. This extremely rare penny is the earliest surviving coin produced in Glasgow. It's one of only a very small handful remaining in existence. And given its importance to Glasgow's history, I think it's one of the most significant objects in the Hunterian's collection, but I am a wee bit biased. Now, Robert the Bruce's coins are exceedingly rare as well, but Stewartby was able to acquire a number of them. This is one of Robert's silver pennies. He's depicted crowned and is titled as Robert by the grace of God, King of Scots. His coins were probably only minted at Berwick after the Scots recaptured the town in 1318, 4 years after Bruce's victory at Bannockburn. Berwick had been held by the English since 1296. Now, given the great rarity, it's highly likely that they were only minted for a brief time, and I think more significantly given the rarity, this makes this coin one of the very few remaining tangible links to the reign of Scotland's most famous king. Now, the medieval coins that we've looked at so far have had stylized depictions of the monarch. They provide very little indication of how they actually looked. But due to the influence of Renaissance ideals, this changed during the reign of King James III, some of whose coins depict him in a more lifelike fashion. The earliest of these coins is this groat, which was minted from 1471 to about 1483. The obverse depicts James quite unusually facing off to the right, rather than in profile or facing forward like on earlier coins. And the reverse is also quite significant as it features the very first appearance of the thistle on a Scottish coin. This later coin, minted from 1484 to 1488, has a much more realistic portrait of James III. And I should say that this coin in particular is quite an incredible example. Most of these groats are very heavily worn, but this is one of the best preserved that I've personally ever seen. Now, these two groats of James III are the first coins issued in the British Isles and some of the earliest minted outside of Italy to feature realistic portraits in the Renaissance style. Now, while James IV, that's James III's son, is generally remembered as a great Renaissance prince, his coinage doesn't really reflect this. He defied the pattern set by his father and returned to minting coins with medieval-style portraits. This silver groat is the only exception, because you can see a little bit of realism in how the king's beard has been depicted. But this coin, I think more importantly, has an incredible story behind it. It was specifically struck in 1215 for distribution during the Royal Monday ceremony. This ceremony takes place on Maundy Thursday, that's the Thursday before Good Friday. In England, monarchs had distributed coin to the poor as part of the Royal Monday from the early 13th century onwards, and Scottish monarchs also carried out similar acts of almsgiving. Now, usually during these ceremonies, regular circulating coins were distributed. However, there was a shortage of coinage in Scotland in 1512, so James IV sent one of his silver wine jugs to the mint to be melted down and minted into coins for distribution during the ceremony. It's thereby very likely that James the Fourth actually handled this coin that's up on the screen. The Royal Monday ceremony continues to this day. The next one will take place next month. And the use of specially struck coins in Monday ceremonies has been the norm since the late 18th century. But this coin of James IV, which is one of only three remaining in existence, is the earliest identifiable purposefully struck Monday money, predating the others by over 2 centuries. And this Monday groat of James IV is also significant as it was from the collection of Joan Murray. Stewartby frequently collaborated with Joan and her husband Jock Murray, both of whom built significant Scottish coin collections of their own. Stewartby acquired coins from both of their collections after their deaths in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, Joan Murray was a fascinating figure. She worked as a codebreaker at Bletchley Park during the Second World War and helped to crack Nazi Germany's Enigma code. And she was briefly engaged to Alan Turing at this time. If you've ever seen the movie The Imitation Game starring Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing, Joan Murray is portrayed in that film by Keira Knightley. After the war, Murray developed an interest in Scottish numismatics and made many contributions to the field. And last year, in the run-up to the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings, she was honoured with the placing of a blue plaque on her childhood home in London. But up on this slide, you can see another blue plaque that's dedicated to her. This one is on her Oxford home that she lived in until her death in 1996. The coinage of Mary Queen of Scots is one of the most fascinating, as the events of her tumultuous reign really did play out on them, but we've only got time to look at one today. So Mary ascended the Scottish throne in 1542 when she was just 6 days old. In 1548, she was sent to live in France, and in return for French military aid, it was agreed that she would marry the heir to the French throne, Dauphin Francis, and they married in 1558. Mary and Francis ascended the French throne in 1559, but conditions in France and Scotland changed drastically in the following years. Mary of Guise, that is Mary Queen of Scots' mother who ruled the country on her behalf, died in June of 1560, and her death paved the way for the Protestant lords of the congregation to take power. And in August of 1560, the Scottish Parliament passed legislation that made Scotland officially Protestant. And before the year was out, Francis died, leaving Mary widowed for the first time in her life. This silver testoon up on the slide is the first coin to be struck that reflects Mary's status after the death of King Francis. On the obverse, we have what is widely considered to be Mary's most skillfully executed coin portrait, and she is titled as Queen of Scots, and the reverse shows her coat of arms as both Queen of Scots and Queen Dowager of France. And what's interesting about this is that Mary wrote to the French Mint in February of 1561. That's 6 months before her return to Scotland in August, with the request that they make the dies for her new Scottish coinage. So this coin was designed by Antoine Boucher of the Paris Mint, and the dies were then brought to Scotland and used to make coins at the Edinburgh Mint. So just months prior to her return and only shortly after the death of Francis, Mary was already redesigning her coinage in preparation for her return home. And I think this just demonstrates that she very well understood the importance of using coinage to promote her image once she returned to Scotland. The long reign of Mary's son, King James VI, produced the most varied coinage of any Scottish monarch. One of the most impressive of them is this gold £20 piece, which has a weight of 30.5 grams, which makes it the heaviest gold coin to circulate in the British Isles up to that point. This coin depicts an armoured James VI, who was then only 9 years old. He's shown with a sword in one hand and an olive branch in the other, and the inscription beneath him translates to "prepare for either," symbolising that he was ready for peace or war. Only 193 of these coins were minted from 1575 to 1576, and being of such low mintage and large value, it's likely that they were intended for distribution as royal gifts. This is the Thistle Noble, which was struck from 1588 to 1594, and it's one of the most elaborate coins minted during James VI's reign. Now, the Thistle Noble was intended for use in international trade, so it was modelled on the English real, a coin that was commonly used in commerce in the Low Countries. The English real, which is exemplified by this specimen from the reign of Elizabeth I, depicts the monarch on a ship. Now, this isn't a Stewartby coin. It's from the collection formed by William Hunter between 1770 and 1783. Hunter's donation forms the foundation of the museum, which is named in his honour, and we'll see a few more of his coins later. So the Thistle Noble broadly follows the English coins outline, but it has a distinctly Scottish twist. So here's the obverses of the two coins up on the slide. And as you can see, instead of a depiction of the monarch, the crowned royal arms appear on the Thistle Noble. And the same is true of the reverses, which is also a Scottish take on the English design. So if we look at these two coins, we can see that instead of a rose superimposed on a sunburst, which appears at the centre of the English coin, a pair of crossed sceptres and a thistle occur at the centre of the Scottish coin. And Scottish lines rampant radiate around this central motif, as opposed to the lines passant on the English coin. So on the 24th of March 1603, James VI succeeded Queen Elizabeth I of England, ruling as James I of England and Ireland. In the following year, in an attempt to bring Scotland and England into closer union, he established a monetary union between his two kingdoms. As part of this monetary union, each kingdom was to produce coins of the same standard weight and comparative value that could be used in both kingdoms, while retaining their own separate mints and currencies. So Scotland kept the pound Scots and England kept the pound sterling, and a par of exchange of 12-to-1 was established between these two currencies. So for instance, the gold unite was worth £12 Scots in Scotland and £1 sterling in England, and this Britain crown up on the slide was worth £3 Scots in Scotland or 5 shillings sterling in England. And we see the union reflected on these new coins, which were struck in both countries. So on this Britain crown, which was minted in Scotland, although the denomination was also struck at the English mint, James is no longer titled just as King of Scots, but as King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. And I should say the inclusion of France is due to the claim to the French throne that English and later British monarchs maintained from the 14th century up until 1800. James inherited this claim from Elizabeth I alongside the kingdoms of England and Ireland. James's kingdoms are also represented heraldically on the reverse of this coin. So the crowned shield of arms features the arms of England and France in the first and the fourth quarters, Scotland in the second, and Ireland in the third. You'll also notice that even though this is a Scottish coin, James is no longer titled as James VI, and this is because he considered himself to be James I of Great Britain, a title that he adopted in late 1604. James used this unified coinage to promote union between the two kingdoms, and we see this in the names of some of the coins, including this Britain crown, which is named after both the island of Great Britain and James's new British title. The reverse inscriptions also promote union. So on this Britain crown, the reverse legend directly translates to Henry the Roses, James the Kingdoms, which is interpreted as meaning Henry united the Roses, James the Kingdoms. It thereby compared the union of the two kingdoms of Scotland and England under James VI with the uniting of the warring houses of Lancaster and York by Henry VII of England over a century before. The last Scottish gold coins were minted in 1701 during the reign of William II, and two denominations were struck. These were the pistol that's up on the slide that was worth £12 Scots, and a smaller half pistol worth £6 Scots. The obverse depicts William himself, and the reverse shows his royal arms. These coins are directly linked to the Company of Scotland trading to Africa and the Indies, which is more popularly known as the Darien Company due to its role in orchestrating the disastrous Darien scheme, which was a botched attempt to establish a Scottish colony in modern-day Panama. About a quarter of all the money in Scotland was tied up in this project, so its failure had dire economic consequences for the country, and it was one of the reasons leading to union with England in 1707. These coins were made from gold dust imported by the company from West Africa, and as such, the company's rising sun crest appears beneath the king's portrait to acknowledge the company's role in importing the gold. The pistol and the half pistol are extremely rare today, as a very small number were minted to begin with, and most of these were later melted down. So this is a very rare survivor. Now, political union with England to form the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707 brought an end to Scotland's coinage. As a provision of the Treaty of Union, both nations were to use a single British coinage. So the last coins of the Kingdom of Scotland were issued by Queen Anne from 1705 to 1706. And this up on the slide, we can see a silver 10 shillings from 1705 that depicts Anne herself and her royal arms. After the Union, all Scottish and all silver Scottish and foreign coins circulating in Scotland were called into the Edinburgh Mint. These old coins were melted down and struck into new British coins from 1707 to 1709. These were of the same standard and design as those produced in England. This is a silver crown that was minted in Edinburgh as part of this recoinage. And here's the obverse of that Edinburgh crown on the left, alongside a London-produced crown on the right. And as you can see, the coins struck by the Edinburgh Mint are almost identical to their English counterparts. The one exception being that that an E appears beneath Queen Anne on the Edinburgh coin, just to denote its mint of origin. And here's the reverses compared. And despite being produced in different mints hundreds of miles apart, they're both pretty much indistinguishable. This recoinage was completed by 1709, and in total, the Edinburgh Mint struck over £370,000 sterling worth of old Scottish and foreign coins into new British coins. So these coins of 1709 are the very last to be minted in Scotland, 6 centuries after Scotland's first coins had been issued by King David I. The scale of coins is something that's lost in presentations like this, so I hope this photo will give some idea of their true size. So many of the coins we've looked at today, starting with the penny of David I up on the left there, and ending with the crown of Queen Anne in the bottom right, are shown alongside a modern pound coin of Charles III, just to give an idea of scale. And that's where I'll be finishing today. Thanks for coming. Working with the Lord Stewartby Collection has been the highlight of my time at Glasgow University, so it really is an immense privilege to get to share some of it with you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you've got them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cameron, for a whistle-stop tour through a long history of Scottish coinage. There are a few questions in the chat, which I'll get to. And I've got a few questions to ask you myself as well. And if anyone would like to take themselves off mute to ask away, you can do that too. So Cameron, you have spent a long time working with the Hunterian collections, and you're also studying at the university, but I wondered if you could tell us perhaps when and how your interest in coinage first began.
Well, to be honest, it's a bit of a childhood obsession. It started when I was I think it was about 12, and my dad took me to the Barrows, which is like a kind of market in Glasgow, and there was a guy there selling Roman coins, and I just thought it was amazing that you could actually own stuff like that, and that's where it started. So I got a few of them, and it's continued ever since. So when I came to university, whenever I had a dissertation to do, or a master's thesis, and then moving on to PhD, it was always coinage focused. And Glasgow really is the perfect place to do that, just because the Hunterian really does have one of the best coin collections on the planet. So whenever you're researching something, and if it's a Scottish, English, or British coin, there's a good chance that the Hunterian's got at least one. So quite fortunate in that if I'm reading about something, I can usually go in and see it in person, which is just a bit of a dream come true, to be honest, because it really is. It's an immense privilege to get to actually see it there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cameron. And could you tell us a little bit about your PhD research and what you're looking into? And
Yeah. So my PhD focuses on the Anglo-Scottish Monetary Union, which we discussed earlier in the slide, particularly during the reign of James VI, hence the James VI bias in this week's presentation. So I focus on the monetary union, and I consider how was it established and how well was it maintained into James's reign and then into the reign of his son, King Charles I. But yeah, the Hunterian has been an incredibly useful resource for that, because I do quite a lot of comparing the coins of Scotland and England, and when you do that, you need as many examples as you can get your hands on, more or less. So many of them here that it's been a bit of a godsend, getting to examine them in person, because often you'll see details that don't often come up in photos, or you'll notice things that you wouldn't have otherwise noticed if you're just looking at a 2D image. So the institution really has been perfect for that, and especially with the recent gifting of the Stewartby Collection. Just been so many to work with.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll just read out a few questions from the chat. There's a question here. Who would decide the wording on the reverse of the coins?
The monarch usually, but it was often governed by precedents. So what you'll find with a lot of coins is you reuse the same legends over and over again. So let's take, what is it? This one here, O Lord, save thy people. I think that goes back to the early 1400s at least. So quite often you'll find that they'll refer back to their ancestors' coins and copy what they said. But usually it would have been the monarch or the regent that picks out the inscriptions.
Great, thank you. Another question here just around the shape of coins, and are the irregular shape of these coins due to their original manufacture, or is it wear or clipping of the edges?
It's caused by all of those factors. So for the bulk of the period that we've looked at today, coins were produced using what's called the hammered method. And to make the blanks, they would have either cast them or hammered out a sheet of silver or gold and then cut them out. And because this is a handmade process, you do get a lot of irregularity in the shapes. And I mean, just going through all the coins, you can see that none of them are perfect circles. Another reason that could occur is also clipping, where people would shave silver off the edges of the coins. So that definitely factored into it. But you'll notice that as we get towards the end, starting in the 1630s, Scotland begins to use machinery to mint its coins. And it's with the advent of that you start to see much more rounded coins. So this one here, not a perfect circle, but it's much better than what we're seeing before. And then when we got on to Queen Anne, you can see they're much more rounded. So yeah, it's mainly the technology that causes it.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question here from the chat. Was the James VI Thistle Noble the first depiction of a ship on Scottish coin, or did James IV or V, for example, mint coins depicting ships?
The earliest depiction of a ship on a Scottish coin is the Noble of King David II, which was minted sometime in the 1350s. It's an incredibly rare piece. I think there's only 4 left in existence. And like the Thistle Noble, David's Noble was actually based on the English Noble, so it effectively just copies the design of the contemporary English Noble of Edward III with a few changes. So that's the very earliest. James IV also minted a very rare, it might be a coin, we're not entirely sure if it's a coin or a medal, but he minted a coin in imitation of the English angel, which also depicts a ship. So yeah, so it's not the earliest. Sorry, James IV, not James III.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for today's talk, and thank you everyone for joining us online today.